Hi, I'm delighted to be here. Almost 20 years ago to the day, the Academic and Special Libraries section of the LAI held a conference on Information Millennium Threat or Promise, at which I spoke. Okay, so 20 years later, I'm back. And that was the only way these things were disseminated at the time. Haven't we come a long way, and haven't we built an amazing community? And I take no credit whatsoever for that. Okay, but I have to say something for my filing system, that I found that after 20 years. Okay, so now I don't see how anybody could possibly follow that talk. Okay, so you just have to forget that and come back to a much lower level. Okay, but I did realise that when I was sort of going over the biog and so on, that I really hadn't explained to you why I get these fellowships, and that maybe that's a bit of a gap. I should also note that since many of you will know me through my work with McGrath Barrett and Associates, in which I work with Julia Barrett as in a training partnership for libraries. You should not assume that Julia agrees with anything I say now. Okay, I hope she wouldn't disagree, but just to fill that one. So I went freelance 30 years ago, and the reason that I went freelance was because I was working very, very happily in an incredibly supportive library in UL, but what is now UL, and I wanted to go back to college and do a PhD, because there are two big passions in my life, and they are, I know you're not going to believe this, but I'm going to tell you anyway, okay? 17th century Irish parliaments and towns and taxation, okay? and library and information work. And so the only way to combine both was to go freelance and go back and do my PhD. And so the reasons that I get these fellowships is not because I'm a librarian, it's because I'm a historian, okay? But I am also a librarian, and I want to talk about how research fellowships can be used to build communities and to market libraries, because I think they have an enormous role. And I would like to think that we can also, before I get to my final slide, discuss the possibility of having research fellowships for Irish librarians. If you can imagine how transformational it would be for us as a profession if people were able to take a month or 2 months off their day job and just sit and research and write and come up with new ways of working or review possibilities and technologies. I think it would be absolutely transformational for us as a profession. So I want to talk through, it really is a sort of a travelogue. I'm going to talk through the fellowships that I've had and how that's transformed my research, but also more particularly what's the payback for libraries from that? Because what a research fellowship is, if you're not familiar with them, it's where libraries give a stipend to scholars to come and sit in their libraries and archives and work through their unique collections. And so it would be a wonderful thing for ITMA, for example, to have such a thing, because it would, again, make your unique collections used in a very different way. And they are a very, very, very cheap, cost-effective way of libraries making sure that their unique collections are used. And I've been lucky enough to have 6 fellowships. Now, I should explain to you that when I go for a fellowship, I have to do my research. I have to go through the library's catalogues and finding lists and identify the items which are important for my research. And then I have to make a case to those institutes for why they should pay me to sit there. Okay? And I am in competition with scholars in every discipline worldwide to get these. So it isn't just that I'm going, it's that scholars worldwide are using these collections, are using their catalogues, are using the websites, are using the digital collections and the digital libraries to identify material that they use. And that has an immediate payback for libraries, because instantly your website is being used more. Your footfall goes up. So I was just putting up this slide just to show you what I'm doing, but really the bottom line is the reason I get these is that I'm a historian of early modern Irish parliaments and towns, and I'm currently writing a book on the operation, I know, just hold with it, okay? The operations of the Irish House of Commons between 1613 and 1648, which is to be published by the Irish Legal History Society. And so when I'm going for these fellowships, what I'm doing is I'm trying to find resources that will allow me to do that. And so unique material for my books. And they are a time of enormous productivity, and they transform my research. But there is also a payback for the libraries. So if I go through some of these, what are the advantages for a scholar of getting a research fellowship? And I should explain that research fellowships can be, it depends on the institution, some of them can be for a month. Very frequently they're for between 1 and 3 months, but sometimes they're for a year or even 18 months. I've never felt able to ask my family to let me go for 18 months, okay? So I have tended to go for 1, 2, and 3 month items. So I get paid to sit all day, every day, in libraries reading. Now, when I was heading off to Paris on my fellowship, thinking, I can't believe I'm so lucky to go to the Centre Culturel Irlandais to use their resources for a month, all expenses paid, everything covered, and my son Oisin looked at me and said, Mammy, you know, most people would pay not to do what you do. So I'm assuming that most of you agree with Oisin, okay? But I can't think of a nicer way of spending my time. Okay, so it's a residency for scholars. Did I press something here? No, okay. It's a residency for scholars in a library or research centre. Now, you have no idea how hard we work on these research fellowships. When I'm there, I literally put in 6-day weeks. And I see all of my fellows doing exactly the same. And it's only on a Sunday that I fan out across LA or Paris or wherever, and I do the tourist thing because I am so grateful to be there and I need to make the most use of my time. When I was in Huntington, I got through 84 boxes of manuscripts. That's a huge amount of work. So this isn't a holiday. This is very serious work, okay? So what happens is they fund me to cover my travel and living expenses. It's not that I am expected to make a profit on this, I can assure you I don't, but they cover my costs, which is hugely important for me. It gives me access to unique collections that I couldn't otherwise get. And this is really important for libraries because what we're finding, and I remember a talk actually in the DBS last year, Mary, or possibly, yeah, I think it was last year, when somebody was coming along talking about special collections and saying that as traditional use of libraries is under threat, what is actually growing always is the unique collections. And the research fellowships support the use of these unique collections. So they can be books, they can be manuscripts, prints, drawings, photographs, audiovisual, realia, anything, okay? What it gives the scholar is protected time. I'm unbelievably productive. I actually wrote the drafts of 3 chapters in my month in Texas because I have nothing else. I have no social obligations, I have no work obligations, I have no domestic obligations, and I can be incredibly productive. So that means the stuff comes out, okay? It's protected research time, and that is the thing that is most valuable for me. But it's also an opportunity to meet other researchers and specialists. So it does create a community. And I have made very good friends and excellent contacts with other scholars. It's not just that that's useful to me in terms of my scholarship, although it is. It's also that I can introduce my students to them. And so that creates a wider community. And I've made some very good friends and some excellent contacts through these, which are very helpful to me. It's an enormously enriching cultural experience. I was in Texas I left the day before the vote. Oh, exactly. It was a very culturally enriching experience. I tell you, buying Texas cowgirl boots is a surreal experience. Okay, and I'm not a shopper, but it was an extraordinary experience. Okay, at seeing the match days and so on, but also the opportunity to meet people who are doing very, very different things. And always when you're in a place that has a research fellowship, there are talks and launches and things going on that on subjects you would never think of going to. But because they're on, you go, and so you get a very different breadth of understanding of what's going on. It's seriously helped by some of them serving sherry, but that's not the critical thing, okay? What are the advantages for libraries? The first one is it's very good for your marketing. When you put out a call for papers, everyone's going, ooh, I've never heard of that institute. I've never heard of that library. And they have to go and they have to look and see. So it's very, very good for your profile. It means that learned scholars, you're getting people who actually know a lot already. So, for example, when I was in the Huntington Library, there's a manuscript there that's been used very extensively by Irish scholars, but also by Brian Friel as part of the background research for his play Making History. And nobody knew who had written it, but I've identified the author. So that's a way of paying back to a library by giving them information that they didn't already have. When I was in the Harry Ransom Centre, there was a letter there which they had listed as from William, Earl of Meath, first Earl of Meath, from 1651. But when I looked at it, I realised it was actually Edward, the second Earl. It was from 1658, and it was a really important letter, although it was only one page, on the Cromwellian land settlement and how that worked. So I was able to draw attention of other scholars to that. When I sit in libraries on research fellowships, I am emailing other librarians and other scholars all the time saying, I think you need to know about this. I think you need to know about that. So it's very, very good for that, building communities, but also increasing the knowledge of the collections. So it gives a very much heightened awareness of special collections amongst the research community. A much increased web traffic for your digital collections because you know about them and you promote them to other people. Obviously the citations, particularly for manuscripts, are very, very important when usually what you are aiming to do is publish. And when my book comes out, all of the research institutions that I've had fellowships with, their stuff is going to be cited very, very extensively. And that's an ongoing payback for them because it draws the attention of other people to those collections and to what they're useful for. There are always talks, lectures and conferences, and when I give talks and lectures and papers, I always reference the material that I got and I cite the collection. It also creates a community of supporters. I feel so warm and fuzzy about the various places who have given me fellowships, but when I'm away, I'm always saying to them, do you know about Marsh's Library? They have research fellowships. Do you know about the Edward Worth Library? You should apply for a fellowship there. So there's a huge amount of word-of-mouth promotion with other scholars about that. It's very demonstrable value for funders. The first thing you see when you go into the Huntington Library is they have a large collection there and they say, books written by our fellows. And that's an obvious payback for the funders because they can see what the value is for the library. What's the application process? They call for proposals with guidelines and a deadline, and you have to develop your proposal, and you do that by going into their catalogue, going into their digital library, going into their finding lists, and identifying all the items that you need to have a look at, and you submit it with references, and then they write back and they either say yes or they say no. So the fellowships that I've had are here in Marsh's Library in Dublin. I'm going to go through each of them and just tell you what the payback also was for the library there. The Centre Culturel Irlandais in Paris, that's the old Irish college. It has a phenomenal collection. The Edward Worth Library, which is in Dr Stephen's Hospital, beautiful 18th century library with an incredibly rich collection. The Moore Institute in NUIG in Galway, the Huntington Library in San Marino in LA, and the Harry Ransom Centre. So this is Marsh's Library, very familiar. I started off with a 3-month, but they actually asked me if I'd like to stay on for a further 3 months, so I got 6 months, which was absolutely transformational for my research. I was working on parliamentary orders from 1640 to 1641. So what were the outputs? I gave a lecture in the Long Room Hub in Trinity on that, just based on that, and I have to say they did their PR really well. It was very full. A huge amount about this in the chapter on redress of grievances in my book. But what it also gave me was a much more enhanced relationship with the library, and I hold my paleography classes in there. When I do lots of word-of-mouth promotion of Marsh's Library amongst other scholars because it's such a great place to have a research fellowship, and they're so welcoming, they're so knowledgeable, they're so helpful, and the collections are absolutely phenomenal. And so anytime they're calling for fellows, I'm there retweeting away to all of my fellows and sending emails to my scholarly connections if I think that they're going to be useful to them. The Centre Culturel Irlandais really is as nice as this. It's in the Rue des Irlandais, and they have an incredible collection on 17th century French, English, Irish and Scottish books. So again, it was absolutely transformational for my research. What I was doing was I was comparing, Irish and French representative institutions in the early 17th century, which is a very fruitful area. And the condition that they have is that they want you to write a report on it, and the report is held there. And I get emails from people asking for copies of that. I had one from Germany last year. I feel very positive about them because I know what their collections are, and I very much promote the suggestion that other people should go to their fellowships. I got so much out of it. I also got a very good friend out of it, one of my fellow fellows. This is the man himself, Dr. Edward Worth, complete with books, and Dr. Stephen's Hospital in the background. I was using their political collections for a comparison with England and Scotland because they have some really good stuff. I gave a lecture in there as a result of my work, and lots of stuff in my book, again, from that. Again, I have an enhanced relationship with the library, and I use a lot of their online exhibitions in my teaching, which is really helpful. Again, I tend to use a lot of their social media content, and again, I promote it very, very strongly, especially overseas. The Moore Institute for Research in the Humanities, I love the Moore Institute. I had a really happy month there. I was working on Liber A, which is the records of Galway Corporation from the medieval to the early modern period, and I was only interested in 50 years, and I was trying to reconstruct the composition of the town council at the time. Afterwards, I gave a lecture, went back to give a lecture on it. There is an insatiable hunger for Irish local history. And we did a radio interview in the morning. The lecture was a joint venture between the Moore Institute and the Galway Historical and Archaeological Society. We did an interview that morning. One of the archivists from NUIG did it, and they also were tweeting about the images from the book. It was an absolutely foul night. You wouldn't have put out a milk bottle that night, and there were 150 people in the room, and they stayed for 2 hours talking about it. Now, that is a serious payback for the Institute. I'm hoping to publish the paper as well, but I also have a much enhanced relationship with the Moore Institute and the Hardeman Library as a result of it, which I really value. This is the Huntingdon Library and the Art Gallery and Botanical Gardens in San Marino. It's an unbelievable place. And I was using the Hastings and Nugent papers as sources for representative government in Ireland. I gave a brown bag talk there about taxation in early modern Ireland, which again brought in lots of people who wouldn't normally come, so it increased their footfall. Every chapter of my book is absolutely full of stuff that I could not have got anywhere else from this. It was so valuable for me. I gave a conference paper at Tudor Stuart Ireland with a podcast, and I have 2 articles in press at the moment, one in Riach na Mí, which is the Meath Archaeological Historical Society. It's going to be launched in 2 weeks, and another one in Analecta, which are from this collection. So 3 articles from 1 2-month stint is actually a very good payback for the Huntingdon. I made wonderful new contacts with whom I share research and so on. So it really built a community there. This is the Harry Ransom Centre for the Humanities. They have unbelievable collections, including a huge amount of Irish material. And so I think they don't really emphasise their early modern collection, but it was really valuable for me. So it was an incredibly useful time for me. I got a huge amount written using their material as source documents. This discovery of a new manuscript on Cromwellian land settlement. We corrected the catalogue record as a result of my input. We also drew the attention of key scholars who work on the Cromwellian land settlement in Canada and Ireland. We got a whole Twitter storm going, and I'm writing a blog post on it again, and that drives traffic to their digital library. On the way, I got the opportunity to give a paper in Wesleyan University, and again, I recreated a lot of the contacts that I'd first made when I went to America to the Folger Shakespeare Library, but also got great new contacts out of them. So you can see that it was really valuable for me, but also that the libraries got quite a lot back out of it. Now, my experience has been solely with research in the humanities, but there are lots of other research fellowships out there that are not about the humanities. So the Jacobs Foundation does one on children and youth affairs. It's on the Swiss-German border, and you wouldn't believe, I mean, do follow up these website references. Berkeley has ones in computer science. The American Cancer Society has ones on cancer research. There are ones in engineering. The Wellcome Institute has ones also on medicine and the history of medicine. But in America, they have fellowships just for librarians. And if you want to take a month off, or 2 months, or 3 months to go and do research around librarianship that's going to enhance your work, your library, your role in your career, you can apply for all of these. And there are some very specific medical ones. I haven't checked up whether Irish librarians are eligible for these, but I think you should follow up these references and go and see, because it could be transformational for your work and for your libraries, and it could seriously raise the quality of the research that Irish librarians are able to do. I would really like if we had research fellowships in Ireland for librarians. I think Connell would be the obvious place to do it. I should tell you that they cost roughly $2,000 a month. So $2,000 a month for that payback is very, very little. It's very, very little. Because there are no other costs. You're not PAYEing and PRSIing people. You're not, there's no change to everything else you do. You've just got somebody sitting there, beavering away using your resources. I have found that my scholarship has been entirely transformed by this, but also my understanding of other libraries, because when I went to the Huntington, I shadowed their digital librarian to see how he worked. I went to visit Caltech to talk to their digital librarian, and the University of South California to talk to their digital library staff. I always take the opportunity of visiting libraries and meeting other librarians and see how things are going there and what they're doing, and that feeds back into my teaching. So there's a huge, huge payback for me, but there is also for my students, and there's also a huge community that builds up around there. It's a really cost-effective way of marketing your services, and I'm going to suggest that you might like to consider developing some research fellowships in your own libraries. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll take a question for Bríd, if anyone has. Yes, I see a hand. Yeah.
Hi, Bríd. I'm Aoife from PwC. We've met in previous lives. I would just like to say that was highly interesting, and your passion and your knowledge comes through. However, I have to disagree with your first statement, where you said you can't take any credit for our community. You should take every credit for our community. Because I actually have just checked, and I went to one of your courses many years back, but I also remember you had many different events. You've always been very open and everything, so thank you for all the knowledge for that.
Thank you very much. Thank you, but I can't tell you what I get back from the hour. I've never regretted becoming a librarian. It's the most collegiate, most helpful, most supportive, most creative profession around, and I know that I couldn't do the work that I do in my teaching and in my research, particularly in teaching paleography, which I teach in archives, without the support and the help of my library colleagues. And I have always been so grateful for the support and the help and the encouragement that I've always had from my library colleagues. And when I'm asked what I do, I always say I'm a librarian, even though I haven't run a library for decades.
Hi, Bríd. I have a question here beside Aoife.
Yeah, hi, Max. Yeah, you should have them.
Yeah, we would love to have one. That's actually my question.
Yeah.
I'm curious as to know how much work you can actually get done in 1 month. I'm in the School of Celtic Studies, as you know, and I work with researchers, fellows, scholars all the time. They never leave the building. We have to kick them out at 11 o'clock at night. I don't know how they're never going to be finished. People don't even retire when they are supposed to. They're still there after their retirement. So I'm very curious how much you can get done in 1 month. I'm in the School of Celtic Studies 10 years now, and I still couldn't tell you everything we have in our collection, so I don't know how you would get that done.
Okay. I did say after I came back from Austin, I'm never going to apply for a month again. A month isn't long enough. A month is long enough for me to go through the items in their collection that I identified as being of use to me. It wasn't enough to write it up. And so I'm never going to apply for a month again. 2 months is really what I need, because it's such a productive time. So I would, but it depends on the subject area, and it depends on how much time you can take off, and what your family commitments are, and so on. But yeah, a month is short. But I got an enormous amount done in the Worth Library in that month as well. So I don't know. I feel under pressure to do a lot more writing. But that said, I have a lot coming out this year. I have 3 articles and a book and 2 chapters coming out this year. So That's the research fellowships for you, you know. That's the research fellowships for
Yeah, I see another.
you. Yeah.
Bríd, thank you. You're an inspiration to all of us. Could I just ask you, because one thing I just was curious about is the relationship between your work as an historian and your work as a librarian, because my experience of the short time I was an historian was, and then going into librarianship, was that librarianship is such an incredibly collegial and collaborative community, whereas my experience as an historian was that that isn't always the case with historians. And I'm just wondering, you know, because you operate in such a collegial, collaborative way, and it was fascinating to hear you talk about doing that as an historian. And I'm just wondering, does that come from your librarianship?
1000%. If you once a reference librarian, always a reference librarian. You know, when I'm sitting down reading through stuff, I mean, I went down to UCC and had a wonderful day reading in the special collections in UCC. And I spent a lot of that time emailing people saying, you need to see this, you need to see that. I know that that's because I'm a librarian. But I also know it's because I've always been an independent scholar. I've never applied for academic work. You know, I've always seen myself as somebody who likes to be a librarian and an information person. And I love doing history. And my library background absolutely informs everything I do as a historian, but it also informs how I teach history. I mean, for example, I do a lecture for my paleography students on how you find manuscripts. Do you know?
Yeah.
And they all say, I never knew that. You know, every single day, everything I do is informed by being a librarian. Everything.
Thank you.